Have you ever experienced a moment when everything is quiet, and suddenly out of nowhere, a loud sound breaks the silence? Not a small sound, not something normal, but a powerful boom that makes you stop, look around, and wonder what just happened. Now imagine that this sound comes from the sky, and imagine that it happens in a place that will soon become one of the most mysterious locations in history. Before the famous 1947 event near Roswell became known around the world, some people living in the area reported hearing strange noises in the sky. These reports did not always make the headlines. In fact, many of them were just conversations between neighbors. But later, when the bigger event happened, people started remembering those earlier sounds. Residents described hearing what they believed was an explosion. Some said it sounded like something breaking apart high above the ground. Others compared it to a strong thunderclap, but the sky was clear at the time. There were no storms in the area. No obvious weather conditions that could explain such a powerful sound. That is why the noise felt unusual. A few people claimed the sound was so strong that it shook windows or made doors vibrate slightly. In small towns, especially in the 1940s, people were not used to hearing loud, unexplained sky events. Air travel existed, and military activity was present in the region, but sudden sky explosions were not something ordinary residents experienced every day. Some witnesses also mentioned seeing brief flashes of light. These flashes were described as quick and bright, appearing for only a moment before disappearing. Because it was nighttime or early evening in some reports, even a short flash would have looked very dramatic against the dark sky. However, there were no official recordings to confirm these visual claims. At the time, the area had military presence. That means planes were flying regularly. Military exercises were not unusual. Because of this, some officials later suggested that the sound could have come from normal training activity. They proposed that it might have been an aircraft issue, a test, or even something related to equipment. These explanations were presented as simple answers. However, not everyone agreed. Some residents felt that the sound did not match what they knew about regular planes. They believed the explosion felt different. Over time, as the famous 1947 event gained attention, memories of the earlier noise became part of the conversation. People began asking whether the two events were connected. Timing is one reason this story became interesting. The reported explosion-like sound happened before the widely known incident. When something unusual occurs in the sky, and then something even more unusual happens days later, people naturally start linking the events together. Even if they may not be directly connected, the human mind tries to find patterns. It is also important to remember that in 1947, communication and technology were very limited compared to today. There were no smartphones, no social media, no instant video sharing. If something strange happened in the sky, it depended entirely on people describing what they saw or heard. That means the story survived through memory, interviews, and newspaper reports. Memory can be powerful, but it can also change over time. When people talk about past experiences years later, details can become slightly different. That does not mean they are lying. It simply shows how human memory works. When multiple people describe similar sounds, it adds weight to the story. But without physical evidence, it remains open to interpretation. Some researchers believe the silent explosion could have been something natural. For example, certain atmospheric events can create loud sounds. Even high-altitude phenomena can sometimes produce unexpected noise. Others suggest it might have been related to military testing, which was active in many parts of the country during that period. Still, there are people who feel the explanations given at the time did not fully match eyewitness descriptions. They point out that some witnesses clearly described a sudden, sharp boom, not a gradual sound. That difference makes them question whether the official statements covered every detail. The interesting part of this mystery is how it connects to the bigger 1947 story. When the later event became famous, it brought global attention to the region. Suddenly, people who had previously ignored the earlier strange sounds started thinking about them again. This shows how one major event can reshape the way earlier incidents are remembered. Over the years, discussions about the explosion before the famous incident have continued. Some see it as an important clue. Others view it as a separate event that happened naturally. Because no confirmed public evidence clearly links the two, the mystery stays unsolved. What makes this story powerful is not just the sound itself, but the human reaction to it. Imagine being outside at night, hearing a loud boom in the sky, and not knowing what caused it. That feeling of uncertainty can stay in a person's mind for a long time. When something similar happens again, it becomes even more memorable. The silent explosion also shows how mysteries grow over time. First, there is an unusual sound. Then there are conversations. Later, there are reports. Then researchers study the timeline. Each step adds more attention. Eventually, the story becomes part of history. Even today, people continue to debate what happened in the sky before the well-known 1947 event. Some believe the explosion was harmless and fully explainable. Others think it deserves deeper investigation. But without new verified evidence, there is no final answer. And maybe that is why this story remains interesting. It reminds us that history is sometimes made of incomplete pieces. Not every event has clear photos or recordings. Sometimes all we have are memories, documents, and questions. So when we look back at the silent explosion reported near Roswell, we are left with a simple but powerful mystery. Was it an ordinary sound misunderstood by witnesses? Was it connected to military activity, or was it something else entirely? The truth may depend on future discoveries. Until then, the reports of that strange boom remain part of the larger story surrounding the area in 1947. A story that continues to inspire curiosity, discussion, and debate. Because sometimes the most mysterious events are not the ones that make the biggest noise, but the ones that leave us asking questions long after the sound has faded away.